Hey everybody, Michigan J here, and we just made a work of art. You can too. Find out how on this episode
What
of
are you
Alter.
doing in our house again?
Run, girls! What works of art do you look at and say, I could do that? Comment below, and I'll get back to you with my best response. If enough people talk about the same artist or work of art, we'll do an entire episode. Today I want to explore the best response to I could do that. No, you can't. Which is maybe, but you didn't. And anyway, that's not the point. Not every work of art is a display of technical ability and artistic talent. Think about it musically. Sometimes it's the simplest songs that have the greatest impact. Not every band needs to be Rush, not every guitarist needs to be Eddie Van Halen, and not every artist needs to be Michelangelo. But how did we get to the point where we're finding urinals in art museums? And I'm not just talking about in the bathrooms.
Wait, that wasn't the bathroom?
During the 19th and 20th centuries, there was a shift away from the standard approach to creating art, where the artist faithfully tried to make the thing look like the thing.
Whether it's a person or a landscape or a terrifying birdman creature feasting on the condemned souls of lecherous clergy,
towards conceptual art, where the artist is focusing more on an idea or concept.
Clever.
The skills required to produce the work, which traditionally would have been developed over years of apprenticeship or art school, became secondary to the meaning conveyed by the work. Now the problem is that most people tend to value things that they could never do. That's why it's so fun to watch professional athletes and musicians perform, and why it's so cool to go see the Sistine Chapel ceiling. It's awe-inspiring and represents another human being's incredible effort, ingenuity, and talent. These new conceptual works of art, however, like this beast, Marcel Duchamp's Fountain, sought to provoke thoughtful reactions rather than display the artist's technical ability. There is no skill to marvel at, and so if you don't know the context or time period and events surrounding the work of art, it can be easy to dismiss it as a load of crap. But context matters. Duchamp was part of a group of artists, writers, and performers during the early 20th century who were sick of the old ways of creating art and disillusioned by the carnage and destruction of World War I. Even before the war, there was already a feeling of been there, done that about traditional painting. Think Pablo Picasso.
No, not even close. Seriously? That's the one.
But the war really accelerated this feeling. The world didn't seem to make sense anymore. Everything seemed to be a product of chance. You step on a landmine and it's a dud. Your friend steps on one and gets his leg blown off. No reason, no rational explanation. And so, because art has always reflected the world, if the world doesn't make sense, neither should art. This new group of artists wanted to push back against the traditional, stable, rational thinking that dragged the world into war and expose the random, ridiculous, hypocritical, nonsensical world we actually live in. So they got together in Switzerland and created Dada, which embraced the random, the ridiculous, and a rejection of all the normal, good art. Even the name, allegedly, was picked by chance, when one of the members stuck a knife in a dictionary and it happened to point at the word Dada, which, as we all know, in French, means rocking horse.
Yes, of course. Go on.
Some of them said that they picked Dada because it sounds like a baby's first words, pointing to the basic, elemental style of art that they were producing. But any way you look at it, they wanted to blow up the traditional art world. Now, Duchamp had left France to come to the United States several years before the war started, so he wasn't part of that original group of Dadaists.
Dadaists? Dadaers? Dadanians? Dadanistas?
And he wasn't as influenced by the madness of the war, but he was moving in the same artistic direction on his own in New York City. Unless you think he was doing as little as possible to get rich quick, he usually had to work other jobs in order to actually make money. And the second people actually started paying decent money for some of his paintings, he quit painting and shifted towards an entirely new kind of art. Duchamp created Fountain in 1917, near the end of World War I. And when I say create, I don't mean physically make.
Wait, what?
The urinal was mass-produced in a factory. All he did was buy it, flip it on its side, and sign it with a different name. Another person or machine or a combination of the two actually made it. So why does he get the credit for it as a work of art? Fountain is what Duchamp referred to as a ready-made, a work of art that was created by using found objects that were, wait for it, already made.
I see what you did there.
The argument for ready-mades as art is that the artist has fundamentally altered the object's function. It no longer is a bicycle wheel or a bottle rack or a urinal because the artist has made a choice to change the object's relationship to the surrounding world. It's been removed from its original context, reoriented, and presented in a way that makes the viewer think.
I think this sucks.
The creation of the object isn't necessarily important anymore. It's the object's new relationship with its new context.
Oh, so what he's basically doing is taking common everyday objects and in presenting them as art, allowing the viewer to see the rest of the world as potential art, which enables us to appreciate the aesthetic nature of objects we typically take for granted.
Fountain has become the most famous ready-made, but there's actually a lot of mystery surrounding this thing. It disappeared almost immediately after it was first publicly shown.
Not surprising.
Nobody talked about it again for well over a decade, and Duchamp himself didn't take public credit until almost 20 years later.
Because it sucks. Nothing.
There are actually two potential narratives surrounding this thing. I'll give you the traditional one first. Duchamp creates Fountain and submits it to an exhibition of crazy, super edgy works of art by the Society of Independent Artists. They had said that they would accept any work of art, no matter what, as long as the entrance fee was paid. So he sends it in as a way of testing just how edgy and inclusive these people actually were. He was already a well-known artist, at least among these hip avant-garde people. He was actually on the board of the group putting on the exhibition. So he didn't want to be accepted just based on his name, which is why he signs it R. Mutt instead. This wasn't just a random pseudonym. According to Duchamp, he was referencing the manufacturer of the urinal, Mutt Works. But he changed it to Mutt to make it a little less obvious and reference a popular comic strip at the time called Mutt and Jeff. R likely stands for Richard, which was slang for moneybags in French, a nice juxtaposition with the urinal. Even the whole name may be a play on the German word Armut, which means poverty. So you got moneybags, urinal, poverty, layers. Lots of layers. It was rejected. Ha! Even these edgy art people were disgusted by a urinal flipped on its side and didn't think it qualified as real art. Finally, someone is making sense. Duchamp resigned from the board in protest and removed Fountain from the exhibition hall. And this is where things get murky. He took it to his friend, Alfred Stieglitz, who was a photographer and supporter of modern art like Fountain. And Stieglitz took this photograph of it, and then the thing disappears. No one knows what happened to it. As I mentioned earlier, nobody even talks about it for almost 20 years. So Duchamp didn't get super rich or famous because of it. He actually quits art altogether for a while afterwards. And it's not until the 50s and 60s that he even gets any attention within the art world. So it's only in retrospect that people thought it was interesting or groundbreaking. In the moment, it was quickly forgotten. The alternative narrative hinges on a letter that Duchamp wrote to his sister in Paris in 1917. In it, he talks about how a female friend of his sent in a porcelain urinal to the Society of Independent Artists exhibition under the male pseudonym Richard Mutt. This has led a lot of people to question whether or not Duchamp actually created Fountain. But if not him, who? The prime suspect is this woman, Baroness Elsa von Freytag-Loringhoven. She was a fellow artist and friend of Duchamp's, who clearly enjoyed pushing the envelope in many different ways. Plus, one of her known works of art certainly has similar subject matter. The other female connection comes from the Stieglitz photograph. In it, you can see a tag in the background that's attached to the work of art. The address on the tag is that of Louise Norton, a friend of Duchamp's, and the author of an article that defended Fountain as a legitimate work of art. So what really happened? It makes sense that Duchamp would use a fake name because of his position on the board. But why lie in a letter to his sister in Paris? The Tate Modern argues that the language that Duchamp uses in saying that his female friend sent the work in implies that she was just a delivery girl and not necessarily the creator. This seems to me to be an almost intentionally obtuse interpretation, as if when a woman submits a work of art, the assumption should be that somebody else created it. Certainly no one with a lady brain could have created this, right? Other scholars suggest that When the work was attributed to Duchamp in the 1930s and he claimed credit for it shortly after, nobody called him out on it who might have known otherwise, so clearly it was his. This may be true, but it may be because it was the 30s and nobody was really falling over themselves to give credit to female artists at the time. Perhaps this is a prime example of a man taking credit for a woman's idea, or maybe Duchamp did it himself. Either way, what we're left with is a work of art that changes the game for the art world. Duchamp's ready-mades and other Dada art influenced later artists like Andy Warhol and Klaus Oldenburg, and most currently Jeff Koons, inspiring them to explore the common or mundane parts of life that most people take for granted and create their own iconic works of art that challenge the status quo. In the end, this plain old urinal, signed with a fake name, isn't really about the way it looks or how it was made. It's about what it symbolizes. A time period of tremendous upheaval, the random craziness of regular life, an opening up to look at the common and the mundane, even the hypocrisy of a new art movement, and a challenge to the regular way of doing things. I want to give a shout out to my Montgomery peeps, Christine and Mel. Miss you guys. And we'll see you next time on Alternative Plate.